Well, everybody, you're in for a treat today because this person has just such an eye for flowers. I can't wait to dive into this conversation. Welcome, Brenna, to the Flower Podcast.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here with you.
I your images just take my breath away so many times, and they're just the simplest images sometimes, and I'm like, wow, like how many flowers did she have to go through to get that one perfect bloom? And I just think, I don't know, I can't wait to get into some of these flowers that you grow. And I know that especially when it comes to pansies, you were talking about, you can go deep on pansies.
Absolutely. And I think for the photography and the flowers, I think the answers might surprise you in how
Oh,
simple they are. So I'm excited to share. I'll share everything.
awesome. Well, we always love to start at the beginning and how people found their way into the world of flowers. And I can't wait to hear your story.
Yeah, I after high school wasn't really sure what direction I wanted to go, so I joined active duty in the Marine Corps and I
The
did 5
Marine
years in the Marine
Corps.
Corps. I did 5
Oh my
years.
goodness.
It was good. It was a great path to kind of find your own identity and um, kind of the direction you want to go in life. And then after I was in veterinary medicine for a little bit, love animals, but it was a lot more political than I was prepared for, in that just sometimes what's best for the animal isn't what the owner wishes. And
Hmm.
I was having an internal conflict with that. So I tried to reroute my career and I ended up in 911 dispatch. Um, Another super high speed career. And I was there
Wow.
for, I think, about 16 years is when I finally got to a point where I just felt like I needed a lot of peace, a lot more peace. I had had my three kids by then. Um, the climate was shifting politically and within, just everything. And I just thought, gosh, I need to work with puppies, like on a shelter site, or flowers, puppies or flowers. I'm just going to manifest and I'm going to bring this into my life. And I actually was able to take a job at Floret Flower. So that
What?
was kind of, yeah, that was my little in out of the flower world. Is Aaron had offered positions for just seasonal, just seed packing, nothing big, seasonal help out at Floret Flower. And I pleaded my husband. I said, this is it. These are my flowers. I said, I'm going to be so great that she's going to want to keep me. And oh, by the way, it's a pay cut to about a third of my salary. And we're going to have to put our kid in childcare for a bit. But can we do this? And he was on board amazingly. So I did. I took the seasonal job at Floret and was offered a full-time position shortly thereafter. And I was there for about 3.5 years. So it was the ultimate crash course in flower farming and learning from the best and learning all the ins and outs. I'd grown flowers all my life, but never in that capacity, never in the flower farming capacity. So it was an amazing opportunity, and it absolutely changed my life in every way and shape possible. And of course, on the side, when you're working there, you're getting all the cast offs and the rejects and the little homeless plants, as I call them. And so I would bring them home and we'd plant them all and more flowers and more flowers. And my boys they were younger at that time. I think my littlest was probably around 4, maybe 4 or 5. So they were really good ages where they were just so excited, immersed in the seeds, immersed in the flowers, watching it all bloom. And it was actually my oldest son, I think he was probably about 9 or 10 at the time, had said, "Hey, mom, can we sell these to our friends in our local community at the farmer market here on the little island where we live?" And I thought, well, yeah, we could bring, a few vases if you guys want to harvest them. So they did. They cut all the flowers and they cut the sweet peas, and we would work together and harvest. And that was our first year that we did just a little farmer market here on Camano Island. And it was so great in the community and so great for my boys, just seeing that whole from seed to cutting to harvesting to, arranging to selling in your community and talking with people. And the sweet peas that were too short for, a good vase, they would just give away to all the kids at the farmers markets. And it was great to see their interaction and just them learning such an honest and simple way of, work and making money and interacting with people around you. And it was a big thing for us. So that's where the name originated with Three Brothers Blooms. It was after my three boys, and it all really just started with them and just kind of a little cast off mishap flower mini farm garden, I guess, that we had at the time. As they got older, after a few years, probably 3 or 4 years into that, the sports took over, the kickboxing and the soccer and all these things. And they needed their mom a lot more, I noticed, to kind of the
Mm.
ages 12, 13, 14, I feel like. I didn't know how much boys just needed their mom present. And so that was a big transition again for us. It was a really difficult decision. I absolutely loved my job at Floret. I loved the people. I loved everything about it. But it was definitely a pour your heart and soul into it kind of thing. And I just felt my kids needed all of me at that time. So that was another big switch where I then um, left that job and became really just a full-time mom. So then the flower farm now was my sole income. It was everything, it's all I had. In addition, of course, to my husband, works full time. So we have that too, thankfully. But so I had to change everything. I had to rethink, okay, well, this is it now. This isn't just the on the side for fun learning as I grow. This is now going to be more of a substantial income for us. So it was a lot of really testing. And I think any flower farmer is going to tell you that your first at least 2, if not 5 years, are really just finding your way and finding what works and what doesn't, and what can you make a profit off, and what's too much work, and what do you love and what do you hate. And there's so many factors that grow into it, off supply and demand, and what your community likes and what your community will pay versus what the market demands as far as price per stem. And it's a lot, but that's, yeah. And then I fell down the pansy rabbit hole, and that's a whole other topic and story. But and that's been this last year for me. But yeah, that's my journey, and that's my journey into flowers.
Interesting. Well, I didn't know about Floret. So what did you end up doing there for the 3 years, 3.5 years? You said you started seed packing and then,
Mhm. I was a little bit of everything, but I ended up as the shop lead.
oh, okay.
So I was the one answering the emails and running the shop out there. Yeah, all the
Okay.
seed packing and organizing and fulfilling orders and just immersed in that goodness.
Cannot imagine that. I know that business for them has exploded, I think, since they transitioned into seed and all of that, and everything she's producing with new varieties coming out. And I think we're all anxiously awaiting some of those new little babies she's working on. So, how
Yeah.
fun to be that close. So, how far are you from Floret?
About 45 minutes. I had about a 40 to 45-minute commute into
Okay.
work when I was driving out there.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Well, so for everybody that doesn't know, obviously you're up in Washington
Hmm.
State. If they haven't figured that out yet, I wanted to share that. And so I know that I've heard it many times that that's sort of the Goldilocks zone of growing flowers up there. Not for everything, but for a lot of really fabulous things, especially those of us in the South who envy the season up there a little bit. Um, but one flower that has always had and I don't really even know why it has a special place in my heart, but that's pansies. And I always, not always, but often had patches of them where
Hmm.
I'd let them, once they got to a certain length, and that wasn't even long compared to today's standards. I had little vases that we'd have, and I love the fragrance and all. I mean, it's just a great little flower. In fact, we're working on a blog post right now about edible flowers, and pansies and violas
Yes.
are a big part of that. And so, for those of you who are interested in creating additional revenue streams, pansies might be a gateway flower for you in addition to a cut flower. So, tell us about pansies as far as what how that came about for you, because I feel like you are one of those people that are truly obsessed with them. Is that right?
Oh, that's an understatement. Yeah, you might have to cut me off at some point here because I'm just gonna dive into my rabbit hole again with you, yank you down in there with me. Um, it started. So I've grown pansies, all my life, and I liked them, but it was I was just used to the kind you see everywhere, the kind you see at the landscaping store, East Hardware at Lowe's. It's like the little red and yellow and purple with blotches, and they're tiny, and you have them in landscaping and pots in the spring. And that's kind of where it ended. And then Erin did her first pansy resource on pansies with cut flowers. And I thought, what? Wait a minute, hold the phone. And then you saw the varieties that she had sold for a while, the Nature Antique shades and the Chianti and Tiger Eye and all these beautiful shades. And I'm thinking, well, why have I never seen this before? So that was probably about 6 years ago, 5 years ago. So then I just dove into it and I thought, well, I want to learn more about these pansies. So I started growing every seed I could find, every beautiful, different, outside the norm pansy I could find. I started experimenting with stem length. Mine were grown in raised beds, and that worked really well for me, having them close together. Then I tried growing them in with my roses. I tried growing them in at the base of my sweet peas. I tried growing them in shade and sun. And my actual raised beds are all in full sun, which was against what I'd always been told that pansies need shade. So I was really testing theories. I was testing theories and I was finding what worked in my zone. My zone really mirrors the United Kingdom. We're very
Sure.
similar to England. Yeah, it's a perfect climate for them. That's really where the garden pansy originated, was out there and kind of shifted into Scotland and Europe and areas. But I was just down this hole and I just wanted to find them. And as I'm looking into it, I'm thinking, well, where are all these beautiful varieties? Because I see these antique portraits and paintings and books, and I'm like, these were real at some time. Where are they now? So that pushed me even deeper. And I bought every book I could find written on the pansy in the 18 and 1900s. And I bought every article and old floriculture cabinet books and anything I could find that pieced together this puzzle of where all these varieties went and why pansies have such a strange kind of bubble around them that they're just for low level landscaping now. And it was fascinating, the things that I'd found. And it's basically, so they started out, you had the garden pansy was the Viola wittruckiana, and then they crossed it with Viola cornuta, which is from the Pyrenees. So it's a heat tolerant little viola. And by breeding those, they made the garden pansy, the Viola williamsii, a lot more heat tolerant. So when you see that, if you see the varieties that are like that, they tend to be better in warmer weather. But my pansies bloom from early spring through fall in full sun, 90 degrees. So
What?
it's not that it's not that they can't be in sun. The trick to pansies is that their roots need to have cool moisture. And it makes it sound like they're hard to grow, and they aren't, because if they get too wet, they'll get root rot, and that's susceptible. And they also can get leaf spot if their foliage gets too wet when it's warm. Um, but if you can just bottom water, try to keep the water off their foliage in the cooler mornings and keep their roots cool and moist. So good drainage, but enough that they stay moist. They withstand 80 and 90-degree days all summer long. Um, and I'm looking back and I'm looking in these old books from the 1890s. I think I was reading one from 1903. And at first he mentions, oh, by the time the summer comes around, the pansy, I think he called them branches, get really long. So just cut them back and you have your compact plant again, which makes sense because a lot of people want them compact, but those long branches are basically the long stem. And by growing them close together, you're just, instead of them, the trailing out, they're growing up. So it's not new, it's not strange or different. This is how they've always been grown. And then you look in other books, and it was even, I think it was Gertrude Jekyll commented on, if you're not growing pansies for cut flowers, you're losing their entire purpose. She's, commented that of all the cut flowers out there, to see a vase of long stem pansies with greenery in the middle of a drawing room would take your breath away. And these are books from 1903. So it's not this new idea. It's just people's idea of pansy has shifted so much over all this time, over the 200 years that they've been around. In the 1830s, they had books quoted, that there isn't a single month that you can't have a pansy and viola blooming, that they're all year, all weather, can survive anything. Yet in the 1890s, it shifted to pansies and violas aren't any good in summer or autumn. So, and I don't think it's that they couldn't be grown. It's just that's what people wanted. For some reason, they decided, well, this is no longer in trend. We just think they're better for spring and not for this anymore. But when things like that come out, I think they just stick and people stop testing it. They just take it as it is. I mean, I'd also heard that they have to be germinated in darkness. Nope, not true at all. All my pansies and violas are germinated open seed with no cover, no darkness, full light.
Really?
And of all the 80 varieties I grow, they germinate great. Actually, even a little bit quicker without having any kind of soil cover. But I did find in one of the older books, they talk about that the soil helps keep them in place so you don't have a little cluster of 3 or 4 seeds all together in the seed tray. Um, so it's really just trialing and just breaking these myths and finding what does and doesn't work. But I have some pansies right now trellising up my trellis with my sweet peas, and they're about 3 feet tall. So it's just, yeah, it's just, you can't underestimate them. You gotta just jump in there. And
You're
it's,
laughing at my facial expressions
I
because
am, it's,
I don't even know what language you're speaking. I mean, you said Gertrude Jekyll, and I had goosebumps all of a sudden. I'm like, this is just crazy. I mean,
it is
this is
crazy.
gosh. Okay, so now that I went from having 5 questions to 5,000 questions,
Ask away.
I have to ask. Okay, so you raise them, you grow them in raised beds.
Hmm.
Obviously, if you're trying to water the roots and not the foliage, you probably use drip
Hmm.
tape, I'm assuming.
I have not had the patience or time or budget to set up irrigation.
Okay.
A lot of my stuff is fly by the seat of my pants. So I do water with a wand, but I am very careful that I wind between them, and my wand is very, very low to the dirt. So not enough
Okay.
to shift the dirt, but very much to keep it off all the greenery as best I can. If anything, it's just maybe the bottom most leaves would get a little bit of water when I water and early in the morning. So, and
Well, especially if they're
that seems
that
to work
tall.
well.
I mean, if they're that tall,
Hmm.
you have some
Yeah.
space
So
to
in
work.
spring, they're shorter, but by midsummer, once they really start growing, oh, yeah. I mean, the leaves aren't even, they're up there. So you're not watering on any foliage at all once they really get started.
Okay. When you grow them in raised beds, I know you just mentioned that they're growing on the trellis with the sweet peas,
Hmm.
and I'm just crazy about that. Is it? Do you have any kind of support for them to kind of help them from kind of falling on each other? I don't know how strong are the stems when they get that tall, because I think of them as still being
So
vine like.
they're, um, they're fairly sturdy that I mean, they're actually a pretty thick 30 stem. So when they're even like, I had one the other day that I picked that was, I think, 27 inches, and I could hold it at the bottom and it stood straight on its own. It didn't sway, it didn't fall, but they definitely do need support as they grow. Like other flowers where you would use, the netting to keep them upright as you water and with wind.
Right.
What I found with the pansies, and I'm actually, that was another thing. I was going to attempt to try them with the netting and see maybe this helps. But I noticed when I grow them with other flowers or with each other, they use each other for support. So I grow pansies in with my phlox, and they grow just as tall as the phlox, and the phlox around them keeps them upright. And the same with the roses. They're growing up between the branches of the roses. It holds them upright. And then the sweet pea trellis, they're in there and they're resting against the trellis and growing up between the sweet peas. So I have found you do need something, whether it's more pansies or other flowers around them that help that trailing stem or branch, whatever you want to call it, maintain an upright position. Yes, but I have found they do need some kind of support in that sense. Otherwise, they just really trail out, which is what people said when they said, "Oh, they're leggy," and trim them back to a compact bush.
Yeah.
So,
I'm. You keep
are you
saying
baffled?
things. You keep saying things, and I'm like geeking out over here. First, 27-inch stems, and you have to keep them trimmed because they get like a book. I mean, I was just like,
The most fascinating thing to me about this all, though, is that this isn't new. This is stuff that there's in books and in pictures that they were doing 120 years ago. And I'm just like, where did it go? How did this get lost? And it's so surprising. And then even too, I mean, pansies don't, so the garden pansies, the hybrids, of course, they don't breed true to seed. You can't just collect the seed and get the same pansy back. Now, I let my pansies reseed and self-seed everywhere because they're beautiful. And it's amazing the different varieties that come up new. Um, but if you are trying to get that same exact variety and it's a hybrid, they won't come true to seed. So they are very labor intensive, and that's from everything I can understand and everything I've read, that's where they went. Is World War One. World
mm,
War One, everyone was called out, and there was no one really to continue to hybridize the pansies. So we lost a lot of varieties, and then in World War II, we lost even more. Um, the last big flush of pansy books, I think, was written in around 1910. And
Wow.
there wasn't another book until 1950. And he
Wow.
basically said, hey, it's been 40 years. We've lost all these varieties. You know, we really need to pay attention to the pansy. It needs work. It needs people who love it to be bringing in these new varieties and, you know, hybridizing these new species, saving the ones that we have. I could go on and on. But so his book was written in the 50s. I don't know how it was received. I don't know how it did. But I do know that there wasn't another book again written until the 90s, another 40 years later. And it was the same story. It was, oh my gosh, look at the pansy. Like we're losing them. You know, we got to bring them back. There's so much to this flower. And now it's been another 40 years. So I'm not sure why it's not grasping and why it's getting missed. But I am hopeful and I just feel it in my bones that now is the pansy's time. Like we're in a position now where people can see, and designers, floral designers, growers, they're really looking for the things that are unique and beautiful. And the pansy is so nostalgic. You know, I can't even count how many people reach out to me. I saw it in my grandma's garden, my aunt's garden. I love them from when I was a
Mm,
kid. They bring
right.
back these memories, the scent. So to be able to take it and bring it in with these beautiful colors and textures that are finally starting to come out and making it into, you know, cut flowers that you can use in arranging and bridal bouquets and in your home of all things. I mean, that's my thing is I just love a vase full of pansies in my house. And I found out by accident, leaving a vase in my sunny kitchen windowsill, they lasted for over a month.
Yeah,
The
they'll last a
stems kept
long time.
growing. The stems kept growing in the vase and they
Yeah.
kept create not even just buds that were on there that opened, they would create new buds while in the vase and keep budding. So I just there's so much potential and I feel like it just everyone pay attention to the pansy. It's so good and it's edible. It's edible.
Yes, yes, just
So
like I said
yeah.
earlier, it's edible. Yes. Well, I am flabbergasted. Well, you know, it's interesting. I don't know. Well, I can only assume that you follow some people in Japan on Instagram. Um,
Yes.
there are some super ridiculous pansies I see over there.
Incredible.
Um,
Absolutely
and I'm
incredible.
like, how do we get some of those seed over
You
here?
and me both. I have been able to get a lot of the beautiful varieties in from Italy, but I have not been able to find a good source in Japan. And they do. They have one called Goblin's Kiss, and they have one called Marie Antoinette, and they are stunning. And so that's still my mission. So if anyone listening has an in to Japanese pansy seeds, let us know. We need to try.
Please. We're begging.
Yeah, but that's you know that's really the biggest issue I'm seeing right now is the one question I get asked more than anything is how do I get the seed? How do I get the seed? It's just not available enough. And with the seed companies, you know, it's supply and demand. They're not gonna, especially because pansies are so labor intensive, they're not gonna produce seed for something that's not gonna sell. So I
Yeah.
think it's just letting them know, hey, there is the demand. People do want these seeds in these colors and these textures and these varieties. Please bring them in so we can get them. So I think it's just we're at that brink right now where we really need to just make it obvious within the floral community to the seed companies especially that hey there is demand, please bring the seed out mainstream so everyone can grow them.
Yeah, I agree 1,000%. I feel like, um, and again, this is another case of the big box stores, the home gardeners, that that animal is such a big consumer of that garden grade with stunting hormones sprayed on them and you know different things to keep them short compact and whatever
Yep.
that group of pansies and violas is such it's such a I feel like we're the tail trying to wag the dog in this situation
Yep.
because we're such a small part of what they see as a potential revenue stream. But at the same time, I don't know. So when you are reseeding, letting them reseed, and obviously it becomes just sort of a mixed bag at that point when they do. Are
Mm-hmm.
you finding anything really cool?
Yes, I just actually earlier this week I found a baby that I absolutely believe is a cross between the honeybee and tiger eye. It's a little tiger bee. honey baby, tiger baby. I don't know.
Tiger
It's
baby. There
really
you go.
beautiful, and I'll post a photo soon.
Okay.
But it is. It's fun to see these new varieties, and I had one that was like an aqua blue. It would look like the turquoise lagoon sweet pea, but in a pansy. So it is. It's fun, and you see these, and you actually can. You can propagate pansies, and you can divide them at the roots. So that's how you would do it. If you wanted more duplicates of like a new variety you did, you can root divide and have 4 plants for the next year, or you can propagate them, which is really cool that the pansies allow you to do that.
Yeah, for
But I have
sure.
found, and I have bought some at nurseries, some varieties just to pop in. But I will say they don't do well for me. They don't
Really?
usually ever get too long stems, and they don't really last into the heat of the summer. So it's interesting that you talked about that, and I'm not sure what the growing conditions are at the nurseries, but it's different. I definitely, all my long stem pansies, all the ones that survive winter, that come back, that reseed beautifully, they're all ones I started from seed. So I do feel like if you're growing pansies for cut flowers, you really are better off doing it yourself from seed, or as a florist buying from a grower that's starting them from seed. Just for me personally, I haven't had very much luck getting them as starts from the nurseries and having them really last in the heat or get those long stems.
Yeah, I just don't think they're bred for that as, the same way.
No, I don't. And I'm certainly not saying, pansies shouldn't be in landscaping. Oh my gosh, they should. And I know there'll always be that market and those
I
people
agree.
that just love them tight and compact in the landscaping. And even back in the early 1900s, it was split. It was the people that wanted the beautiful garden ruffles and colors and streaks and marbling and, long stems. And then there was the other half that was like, no, show pansy, perfect circle, this many petals, and have to be close and compact and tufted. So, even then it was split on what people wanted to grow them for. But it's just the fact that they have so many faucets, and anyone can grow them. You can grow them in pots. You can grow them in
Yeah.
a bed. You can grow them indoors if you have the right setup. It's anybody can grow these flowers, even in hot climates. You can grow them in winter. So I really feel like the pansy it's everybody's flower, and it's edible, and it's beautiful, and it smells like chocolate. I mean, what's not to love?
And well, I know here in the South, growing up, being sort of that, flower geek in the garden, we didn't really have a lot of winter color. And then all of a sudden, pansies came on the scene, and it wasn't that they were new, but they started being widely available for winter color. So we'd plant them in
Mm-hmm.
October, maybe early November, let them root in, and yeah, they'd get hit from a couple super mega cold, nights, but they bounced right back. And I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't even think the only reason why I'd ever ripped them out was because I was wanting to plant something else in that spot because I didn't think they'd last into July. But sometimes, with Mother's Day and other flower holidays and wedding seasons and things like that, I would be so busy. It'd be middle of June before I'd yank it out, and it wasn't because it was ugly. I mean, yeah. So I feel like this is, I know it's not everywhere in our country or everywhere in the world that you can grow them year round, but
Mm-hmm.
I know, hey, there's a pot with a pansy in it that I might come in my house this winter.
I
So
agree. I think, even if you don't have the climate, to grow them year round, I'm willing to bet there's at least one part of the year where you could grow them. They say in the southern states that do get so hot, just to fall sow them so that they will come in the earliest spring or the late winter at a time when, they will do okay. And then for
sure,
us in the Pacific Northwest, like I said, I don't think I have a month where there isn't at least a few pansies or violas in bloom somewhere in the yard.
amazing.
They're much more hardy than people give them credit for.
So let's talk about germinating them because I
Yeah.
know if we're new to that, and you said what you said earlier about most people think that they're light sensitive.
Hmm.
Um, when you do that, like how long does it take to germinate them? Do you put heat on them? Do like
I
a heating
never,
pad?
yeah, I don't use heat on them. They like their temperature and to germinate between 55 and 65 degrees is what I found is best. If you get them over 70 degrees, they don't germinate well. They need it a little cooler, but then under 60, usually it just takes them a lot longer. I have germinated them out I have an unheated little greenhouse. And they will germinate. They just, it just takes them longer if it's cooler. But usually around 60 to 65 degrees is ideal. So I don't use heat baths. I do start all mine indoors on racks with lights just because that's what's easiest for me. My greenhouse is pretty tiny. But yeah, they don't even need a cover of vermiculite or dirt or anything on them. They germinate just fine in light, which was, I found out by accident, which I think some of the best revelations come by accident. But and so
I
I
agree.
I tried all the varieties. I like, was it just this variety or is it all varieties? So then my next round, I did all my varieties with light and they all did great. It takes about 10 days for most varieties to germinate. I do have some that take almost a month for whatever reason. They're just very, very slow to germinate. Inspire Peach is one of my favorite varieties, and it is the quickest to germinate. She is like, boom, we're ready, let's go. And it's a beautiful, beautiful variety. So it just depends on the variety, but usually around 10 days, 2 weeks, most of yours should germinate.
Okay. And then you just to go ahead and plant them out there in the garden directly. Well, let me ask this. Are you using soil blocks? Are you using like containers to sow your seed in or?
Mm-hmm. I usually use the 72 cells. I tried
Okay.
soil blocks this year and they did okay. I didn't have any issues with them. I mean, there's pros and cons to both. So I think it's just a matter of personal preference. I've had success in both of them. I also keep my pansy seeds in my cooler during the non-growing season. So when I'm not
Mm,
planting them, I keep them in a cooler around 40 degrees. And I have seed from 2017 that's still germinating for me. So I think that's a big factor too, is storage in the off season will help. And then I do find that after they've been chilled, they tend to germinate a little quicker versus the seed package I get fresh will sometimes take just a few days longer. Um, but yeah, and then I transplant them out when they're probably about an inch tall, maybe, is when I finally put them out into the garden. And they're all nice and hardened off and happy. And usually they just explode thereafter once you get them into some good soil.
and feeding any kind of feeding recommendations? Are they heavy feeders? I don't even know.
I mean, you can't, obviously, flowers do better when you give them really healthy, good soil. Fertilizer is really good for them. They love that. I've done a little bit of alfalfa pellets sprinkled in there for them. But they really don't need it. They're not really that fussy of a flower. I think they're pretty easy as far as flowers go. I always just make sure my soil is good before I put my seeds out or transplant them out so that they have a nice good start. And that's kind of it. They don't need much additional care. Deadheading is huge. I do say I definitely notice, when you deadhead, it makes a big difference in keeping the base healthy and then shooting out some more blooms. But slugs are the nemesis. That's
Mm.
where my ducks come in. My ducks do a really great job of keeping all the slug population down. And then
Yeah.
really it's just root rot and leaf spot, I think, are the two biggest um, things that you have to watch for with pansies. But they're really not nearly as difficult as it sounds like to grow them. I always start my seeds for me in my climate. Our last frost hits around late March, sometimes early April. And so I start my seeds in late December to early January, just to give you an idea of kind of where, because they can be transplanted out before frost. You don't have to wait for your frost to be over with pansies and violas.
Well, I
So
know it's one of the cool season flowers that and definitely, but I always get nervous planting those little babies out there, and then you get a
I know.
frost, and I'm just like, oh. But I mean, I'm glad to hear they bounce back. How I know earlier you were talking about this, and specifically, how far apart do you plant yours to get them to kind of get that elongation?
So, there's the ideal, like they would say, oh, plant 3 to 4 inches apart, is kind of the ideal if you're growing pansies. I usually plant mine 2 inches apart.
Two
So I,
inches.
I
Wow.
cut that in half because I want them close so that they're kind of supporting each other. So you have the outside of the raised bed supporting the outside pansies, and then everyone else just kind of supports each other as they grow. When they're in between my roses or my sweet peas, I will plant them maybe 2.5 to 3 inches apart because they do have other support systems. But I definitely plant mine very close together, which works great for long stems. I will say though, as with all flowers, when you do crowd them together, then if you do get some kind of leaf spot or something, it is much more difficult to contain because everything is so close. So
Right.
that is definitely
Do they
in
tangle?
there.
Because my thing would be like I'm wondering when you go to cut a stem and separating them out because they're supporting
They
each other. Does
mhm.
that happen?
They don't really tangle. No, it's
Okay, good.
interesting because there's not, as they get long, they have fewer leaves. So there really isn't anything to tangle up. I've
Makes
never had
sense.
issues with them tangled. I mean, I'll find the flower I want and I just follow the stem down to the base and then I cut it with the snips and I haven't had any of them really tangle up.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool. That's great. Well, I hope there's people out there that are going to try more pansies in their future, whether it's this fall or spring or whenever. But I know there's so many amazing varieties. What are some of your favorite? Well, let me ask this. Let me back up just a second. Like Floret, I don't even know how many varieties she's growing over there. Is she still doing them, and how many?
She hasn't sold pansy seed for a few years. I
That's what I
know
thought.
Erin's really into, yeah, she's really into the breeding right now and the new specialty varieties of zinnias and dahlias, and they're coming up with amazing things in that arena. But I don't believe she's sold pansy seed for a few years. It is hard to find companies selling the seeds.
Yeah, that's what
I've
I was
kind of
gonna
been,
ask. Like, where are you
yeah,
finding them?
I've been trialing from pretty much anywhere I can get my hands on. I'm very hesitant to recommend
Okay.
even just seeds to people if I can't be sure that they're going to germinate well and produce the proper flower. I've ordered seeds and the variety that comes up is not at all the variety that the person said they were going to be. So at the end of this season, I'm hoping to get up a resource to share with people like, hey, these are the seed companies I've had really great luck with. I know Baker Creek has some of the heirloom varieties and they're really beautiful. Johnny's has the nature mulberry, one of my absolute favorite varieties, and they do fantastic long stems. They also sell the nature antique. So they're making their way very slowly into these other seed companies. But yeah, Baker Creek and Johnny's for sure. And then in the UK, Chiltern and Plants of Distinction have really beautiful varieties. They pull in from the Italy pansies, so they've got some really beautiful ones over there too.
Okay. Well,
Yeah,
I guess I
I'll
guess
keep
I'll
you
be
posted with what I find.
yeah, I guess I'll be ordering some more seed, driving my family crazy. So, yeah, it's just you got to do what you got to do, I guess,
You
and
do.
it's really crazy. I know another flower that I think okay, so there's two flowers you do a great job of. I know I've enjoyed seeing all of your bearded iris. I know I've enjoyed seeing your phlox that you were showing also, and I feel like I want to talk about phlox for a second because I have some local growers who try growing it. I know I've heard other people in other parts of the country growing it. I've seen it being grown. And I feel like it's just a real headache for a lot of people. And I don't know if you have any tips on it, or maybe it just comes with its headaches. I'm not sure.
I have heard that as well. I've had a lot of people express their difficulty in growing annual phlox. And it's funny because right now, literally my three favorite flowers are pansies, annual phlox, and bearded iris. Roses are always going to be in there. I love my roses, but yeah, those three have really honed my heart this year. Um, I've never had difficulty with my phlox, and I don't know if a lot of it has to do with our zone and our climate. But even just in the germinating, I've had people say they have a lot of difficulty germinating, and I have not had that difficulty. I don't use heat mats. I germinate them the same as I do my pansies, so they probably germinate around 60 to 65-ish degrees, um, maybe closer to 60. And I do cover them with a light layer of vermiculite and seed trays indoors with light. And that's all I do. And I will say that, which variety is it? I think my Dolce de leche is always my first to bloom or to germinate. It comes out pretty darn quick. And then cherry caramel takes a while. Creme brulee takes a while. So it definitely depends on the variety with how quickly they germinate. I have noticed up to a month for some of them to germinate.
Oh,
They're
okay.
very slow to get going. So that may be the thing too, is people just give up on them too soon because I literally just let my phlox sit for a full month before I even think about moving them out of the indoor lights into the greenhouse to continue growing a bit. And then once I plant them out too in the garden, it's a while. I mean, they're pretty tiny for a while, and then they just find their stride, and man, they just get big fast. So I'm not sure if it's my climate, but I will say even for me, with them doing just spectacular, they're very slow. They're slow to germinate and they're slow to get going once you transplant them out. So just maybe put them somewhere that you feel like you don't have to. worry too much about them. It can give them some extra time to get going.
Do you pinch them?
Yeah, because in our zone, I don't pinch my phlox. No, I know some people do. I don't. I don't pinch my phlox.
And how many
I mean, they're spectacular.
Yeah, how many stems do you think you get per plant then? Because I always thought I know sometimes I see people who are impatient and I think they pinch it thinking, well, they'll get more branching. And I don't
Mhm.
know if that maybe they do get more branching, but then they get shorter stems. So I'm kind of like, what is your average stem length on them?
It depends how deep down you want to cut on the plant. So right now they're growing, oh gosh, they're probably 30 inches tall. So if I cut down to the base, I would get a really, really tall stem. But I don't usually cut that deep. I'll usually cut them maybe at 14 to 16 inches so that I'm leaving a good portion of the plant to keep sending up more stems. Um, I don't, for me personally, I don't do very many paper wrapped market bouquets. I do some for local stores, but most of mine I do is on demand bouquets, in vases and jars. So I don't need the stems to be as long for my demand. So it works out well. But I mean, they're definitely long. And I do use netting. I use netting to support them. So that's a big thing too, because they will collapse absolutely. And once they're, flattened down, good luck. Boy, do they tangle. So
Oh
yeah.
yeah. Well, that's interesting. You saying that made me think. So, what is the primary way you sell your flowers?
For me, right now, once I really dug into my pansy rabbit hole, I've kind of put everything else on a mini hold this year. I cut down on the number of weddings I do, and I cut down on the markets that I do. So I have a couple local businesses that sell my flowers, and then a lot of it, I just have a really wonderful regular client list, if you will, where they just reach out to me regularly. I need 4 bouquets this weekend. I need 2 bouquets this weekend. I need
Hmm.
a bouquet for Thursday. And then I just, meet them kind of in the general area where I am and deliver the bouquet. So that's where the bulk of my flowers go, is more um, straight to the customer, if you will, or directly into local businesses. I don't do wholesale or buy buckets just because my farm is very, very tiny, and it doesn't serve me well to do it that way. And plus my passion is in the arranging. For me, it's like the painting, it's
Hmm.
getting to put these flowers together in a way that I
Right.
think lets people see them the way I see them is all the joy for me. So
Yeah, I could see that, especially with some of the flowers you have and the color combinations. I can't even begin to imagine what some of that translates to. So, if those are your three main beauties, what else? Is there anything new you're trying this year? Anything that you're experimenting on, or is it just more varieties of pansies?
I think I have a little over 80 varieties of pansies that I'm growing right now.
Okay, that's
Um,
insane.
I have my beloved sweet peas, I'll always grow those. I have roses. I'm always buying roses, always buying roses. Bearded irises is the other one that I've been down. I keep adding to those. They're incredible. They're so beautiful. They smell fragrant. They do great in a vase. The buds keep opening. The perennials,
Yeah.
they need very little water. So bearded irises are just a fantastic flower to add in. I have a lot of peonies for the same reason. The hard thing is their bloom season is so short. That's kind of the bummer to peonies and bearded irises, is that they have a very minimal bloom season, but gosh, are
You
they beautiful.
So we had Liz on from Shriners last year, and we did a whole blog post on reblooming irises because I love them too. And it's funny,
Mm-hmm.
growing up, I kind of had a bitter experience with them because every time I'd get one get ready to bloom, somebody would come and cut the flower and steal it. So I just have these tragic emotional
Oh.
triggers when it comes to them. But I've kind of gotten over it. In fact, I have a shipment coming from Shriners right now that's somewhere in transit. But and everyone I got, I think, is a rebloomer because I'm trying to. I don't know. I like them now, and I want to have them twice a year.
Mhm.
Are you more for color, or do you ever look at that as a factor when you pick your favorites?
My favorites is definitely based off color. It's based off the ones that I think are beautiful, and fragrance. I love their fragrance. I do have a few that are rebloomers, but I ordered them kind of by accident. Just and that they were ones that were so beautiful that I wanted them regardless. And I have them in every color. These aren't ones where I'm like, I want only the blush and peach and butter yellow palette. I mean, I have them in every color, and they are just stunning. The colors the irises come in, just it blows me away. They're absolutely gorgeous. So I should probably look into adding more rebloomers because yes, getting to have them twice a year would be absolutely fabulous.
So, as far as when you're growing the bearded iris, I know we talked with Liz about like some techniques. Is there anything that you found to be really helpful in growing them, or is it? I feel like sometimes they're pretty easy as long as you don't bury them
Mhm.
too deep.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. You don't want them too deep. They need to be a little more shallow, so that rhizome is properly exposed. Alfalfa pellets I've heard do really great for them. In fact, I just put some alfalfa pellets down on mine. Keeping them weeded well is another thing that I've heard is really, really good for irises. But I mean, I don't do much. At the end when they're done blooming, I'll remove, I think you said they can remove up to a third of the leaves that have the browning and leave the rest of the leaves until the season's done. And then when they're all browned and dead, then you can cut them down to about 6 inches. So I feel like they're really easy to maintain for the most part. And I've had great luck with them. I've dug them up and divided them, and they all did great after that as well. So I think if you're looking for more perennials and more easy flowers to add in, they're fantastic. And they work great as cut flowers. They're so beautiful.
Yeah, I agree. And they have that little hidden bud here and there that even after the first flower kind of is spent, you just pick it off and there's another one ready to come out. And a lot of people toss the flower and it's like you're only halfway through this flower
I
season.
know.
I know
Yep.
I have a patch I need to in this house we just moved to. At the mailbox there is I don't even know. It's like so compacted, and they didn't even bloom. So I didn't even get to see what color they were, whether I should love them or hate them. But I'm like, I'm gonna have to dig these things up and divide them. It's driving me crazy. I'm gonna have to do one of those makeovers, mailbox editions at my house because it's just such a hot mess out there. It's driving me crazy. But I can't wait to see what color they are. Hopefully they go with the ones I've got coming, but we'll see.
Yeah, that's
So
exciting. Post some photos so we can see your mailbox makeover.
that's right. That's it. Makeover. Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, there so many things to dig into here. I love the name of your business, Three Brother Blooms, and brothers, Three Brothers Blooms. Is
Hmm.
that correct?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that's kind of neat. Uh, Being that obviously, I guess they're a part of what you do. I mean, are they helpers? How is it like managing flowers and being a mom and all that kind of stuff? How has that been? How have your kids received doing that? Is it a fun thing or is it kind of like, I don't know, do they find the joy in it like you do?
There's seasons, I think, especially as they grow, because they've gone through such significant age points since we started growing the flowers to where they are now. And it's transitioned to where they were super excited and out there planting the sunflowers, planting everything, couldn't wait to see the flowers, love to cut them, love to put them in vases. And then, they kind of transitioned to where they weren't out there very much. And then they would come out just to be with me. My oldest would
Mm,
come out just to sit in the garden and talk with me. That became kind of his little sanctuary space where this is where I get to connect with mom without the worry of who's listening or watching. So that was really magical. And now they're older, so they're actually more like adult helpers now. They'll go out and they'll harvest a whole crop of phlox for me. They'll cut all the sweet peas, they'll go deadhead. So, and I think they do enjoy some of it. Um, they don't like weeding. Who does? It's not their favorite. So, um, it's definitely been seasons with them in that. And some they enjoy, some they don't. It is farm work and it's hard work. Anyone who does flower farming knows this is not for the weary. It's not as glamorous and beautiful as people want to think it is until you get into it. There's so much work and it's so challenging. And you have sore backs and sore arms and sore legs and injuries and shoulder injuries and elbow injuries and a lot that goes with it. So it's hard to find that balance. There's days I do feel guilty, as I'm sure anyone does that has kids and is doing kind of an at-home job. They're there. You want to be with them, but stuff needs to get done. So I don't know. I've been struggling with this balance even really exist when it comes to the things, or is it just a matter of appropriately prioritizing so that everything gets the attention it needs at the time it needs it most? But I do feel fortunate because for us, I'm not needing to make a huge amount of money off my flower farm. It's a smaller amount. It's more the supplemental income for our family. That does come with a lot of freedom that I'm very grateful to have that I know a lot of people don't. There's a lot of people where they need a significant amount. It's a crop farm. This is a huge livelihood for them. So they don't have the freedom, I guess, to prioritize as easily as I do. So I'm very grateful for that. But yeah, I mean, it's been good. And the boys, they're still a huge part of it. And I've even thought about, well, gosh, when they're out of the house, do I keep the name? Do I transition? But it started from them. It started from them. It started from me trying to get a better life for them, wanting to
Mm.
raise them in this, wanting to instill these memories in them. I want them to remember, hey, when we were kids, mom's garden, and for their kids to be like grandma's garden. And it's such a lifetime thing. So yeah, I think they're definitely still very much a part of it. I hope they always will be.
Yeah. Well, I can see that, and I appreciate that, and it's I appreciate what you said also, because there obviously are people out there that it's their sole income, and it's a different level of a lot of things. But at the same time, it's people like you that are able to go deep into new flowers, or flowers that we know exist but haven't really utilized, like pansies, and um, make it possible for the rest of us to learn from you. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like that's a huge blessing that the rest of us get to learn from you and to see what you're doing and see varieties, and you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know that existed, and it's like you have that freedom to do that. You're not worrying about getting certain things in maybe as much, but yeah, it's still a valuable contribution to our community that you do. So I really appreciate that. I always like to end with that advice question. And so, kind of curious, what piece of advice you might have for our listeners.
Of advice. I think for me, this past year, a couple years for sure, has the thing I found most, and it's been hard. I would say don't be afraid to swim against the current. And again, it does come for me being able to do that. A lot of times it's opportunity. Are you in a position in your life where you can take a risk, where you can do something against the norm? If you're growing very much for crops that necessary and you have to meet the customer demand and you have to be in the palette or you're not going to make your living, you don't really have as much freedom in all areas to do that. But if you're in a position where you can afford to and your heart's telling you, your curiosity is telling you, hey, what about that? Hey, what about that? Go for it. I have a lot of people when I talk about pansies that just kind of look at me like I'm insane or roll their eyes, or it's the pansies aren't supposed to be long. Pansies are supposed to be short. They're not supposed to be this. They're not supposed to be that. And it's beauty to each person. It's different. And I've gotten so much joy, and I feel like my entire life has just gone down this whole other route that I never saw coming. And it feels like it's right where it's supposed to be by swimming against that current, by pushing against it and being like, but why? Asking that, why? Why has it always been this way? Why does it have to be this way? And then just finding out for yourself. Maybe they're right about some things and maybe they're wrong about others. But, all new trails started somewhere. If we all stayed on the
Yeah.
same path, there would never be a new trail. So it's like you said, it's being able to swim against the current is where you find the new things. And I'm grateful. I really appreciate you saying that, that um I try. My whole Instagram page it was almost an accident. It was almost a fluke. It was me growing these flowers and I'm looking at them and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like I've seen this flower more times in my life than I can count, but I've never really seen this flower. And so that's how it started and it's my iPhone. All my photos are taken with my iPhone. Takes me literally a few seconds. I go into my kitchen wall. I have lighting from a window that just casts the perfect natural light on my kitchen wall for about 2 hours each morning. And I just snap a photo and that's it. That's the photos you're seeing. They're not edited. This is the flower that day that spoke to me. And this is me just trying to get people to see it how I see it. Like really look at this flower and look at the beauty, and grow these flowers. Everyone should have the ability to grow these flowers, whether it's just in your flower bed because you're just a person, or you're a hobby gardener, or you're a flower farmer. That I just want people to see all the beautiful flowers and have the chance to grow them. So yeah, that's my hope, particularly with pansies. I want everyone to grow the pansies. They deserve all the love. But
Well, the thing that I think is interesting when I look back and think about this, and you're like, how many flowers that are annuals that we can plant that we get to cut and enjoy for as long as we can pansies? I
mhm.
didn't ask this question earlier because I didn't think of it, but when you're cutting on your pansies, obviously, that sets them back a little bit. Then they rebloom, however, depending on how hard you cut on them. How long does it take for them to bounce back or rebloom? Or I'm kind of curious about that side of it.
So you have the long stems again.
Yeah.
It's curious because they talked about, for in one of the older books, when they're talking about keeping them compact, they specifically say, cut back the longer trailing branches, and it rejuvenates the plant and you'll get more blooms. So the blooms will come back very promptly, even when you cut them long stems down to the base. It does. It kind of shoots all that energy down, and then the base of the plant becomes really happy again. Which, the good thing is that usually that happens closer to the end of summer. So it's a good time to divide them, root divide, and have more plants. Um, but I don't know if you cut all the long stems on one later in the summer. I'm not sure you're going to have super long stems again within that same season, if you will. You'll get more blooms 100%, but they probably won't be as long as stems.
Right. Right. Now that
But
makes
I mean, at
sense.
one plant, oh gosh, I've gotten easily 3 dozen long stems off one plant
Really.
um, in a season. Oh yeah, I mean it's they really, yeah, they're great. They're great.
Well, we'll have to get you to share some of those pictures with us.
Absolutely.
And so if you don't follow Brenna on Instagram, Three Brothers Blooms is where she's at. And I'm just going to tell you now, fasten your seatbelt. You'll probably fall in love with pansies if you're not already, among bearded iris and all the things she grows, but especially pansies. And Brenna, thank you so much for being on the Flower Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I love any opportunity to gush about the pansies, so I'm thrilled that you allowed me to. Thank you.